we're live. Perfect. All right. Welcome, soon-to-be viewers. If there was one thing I've learned in the previous 2 years working as a local reporter, it's the difficulty encouraging civic participation, which is my only agenda as a journalist. I go, oh, turn that. There we go. My goals for news writing are simply to inform residents about the governments which they live under, and provide people with tools necessary to be informed voters. But it seems like most people, particularly younger people, just are not interested in the day-to-day political machinations that govern their lives. To add insult to injury, the average age of a member of the United States Congressman is 58 years. For senators, it's 64 years. That's from the U.S. Library of Congress, circa 2021. Could the age gap be the crux of the issue? The fact that our elected leaders are majoritively decades removed from the future workforce? And why do Americans continue to vote for the same people who are visibly stroking out during press conferences? Joining me to discuss this is Miguel Rael, born and raised New Mexican and local business owner.
Hello, how's it going, Dylan?
How'd you like that intro?
No, good. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, setup's good. I got coffee the first time. Now I've got bread. So next I'm expecting like a full-on dinner. Or no, I'm just.
You're not that rich.
Yeah.
First question: should every elected leader be subject to a term limit?
Yes.
And for how long?
Well, we do it for the most. We do it for the most important elected positions. Wouldn't you say they have term limits? Why can't? And that's in local, state, and federal. So to me, I think the obvious thing would be if our most important elected positions, and now some people would say maybe it's separate but equal, but in all reality, a president is the figurehead of a country. A governor is the face of a state. A mayor represents the needs of a community. So if we have term limits on those elected officials, every other elected official, in my opinion, should have term limits. What do you think?
Would you say enacting term limits at the federal level would be a violation of individual states' right to self-governance? Would it be easier to do at the state level, I think?
Why? Like, what do you mean? Would it?
Because it's written in the U.S. Constitution, at least, to give each state their own right to governance. They handle their own governments.
That is true, but I think on a federal level, if you did it just federally, I don't think that would be able, that wouldn't hinder any state's rights because it's just on a federal basis. You know what I'm saying?
Saying if it was only applied to federal,
if it was only
officials,
applied for federal, I don't, you can make it to where it's only applied for federal and not for state, and if states want to adopt that, they can, but it's just going to be like on a federal base. Only federal elected officials can be term limit. But I think that if the federal government were to do that, it wouldn't, I don't see it as a hindrance on states' rights because what is being violated there? People have the opportunity to to vote. They still have an opportunity to pick somebody. So I guess I don't know how that would. I'm trying to figure out what your mindset is there on why you think it could potentially.
I'm trying to come up with contrarian arguments for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that starting off local would work its way through to the top, but I I look at what positions too. Is it a question of, do all positions need to be termed, or is it all, is it certain branches? That's what we currently have right now, and I think that we talked last time about how there's stagnation when you have the same leaders in power for a while. They kind of get sucked into the vacuum, and then they forget. They kind of lose track of things that need to get done because something new will come up, and then election season's coming around the corner again, and so they have to switch their mindset into that. So they'll just focus on the issue that's going to get them elected. But it's just like this big old circle. So I think there's the clear problem of knowing that if you have the same political leaders in for so long, that nothing's going to get done. My question is, if there were term limits, what's the space? What's the standard? What's the threshold that you cut it off at? 8 years, 4 years, 12 years, 20 years. You know what I mean? What do you think?
If it, let's say it's do you what about the argument that you have one person in there that's very effective, and a particular population wants to keep that same guy in there indefinitely? Is that more dangerous than getting new people in there regularly on a regular basis?
Mm, well, I think that eventually all good things do come to an end. So, like, say for example, you could have a teacher who's been in the thing for 25 years. They can retire, but they're still going. And at some point, the the ways of life, the methods of teaching, the style of everything, eventually starts to evolve. And you see that with like a lot of times people will compare, well, in the old days we used to do this, whatever, and it's like, yeah, eventually there used to be a certain way of doing things, and then we kind of have this evolution as with this progression of time and technological advancement. So I think that even if somebody's doing so well, eventually at some point, things are going to be changing to where, that person maybe has done so well, but they're going to have just represented that time, a time frame. Maybe they represent a generation, whatever. But how long is, I have no problem with somebody being in power like that. But, is it, how long has that person been in power is the question. You know what I mean? And have they made substantial impact of wherever, that there's like no question in your mind that, oh, I truly understand why people are voting for this person, because they're continuously producing results. So that's what I'm saying. Like, what's that threshold? But of of when, if somebody's doing good, is, does that, do we have to punish them? Do we have to take them out of office? Because,
So
you
should
know
term limits reflect
what if I like a
each
judge?
generation? Maybe once an elected official is in office for, say, 10, 20 years,
I've been
they can.
saying 12 years. I think 12 years is a max amount of time that somebody should be in a political role. Like, if you're gonna want to push how long is how long, yeah, 12, 15 years. Because 12, 15 years also do represent a generation, a time, you know? And so it's like, look at it in our current federal system. A senator is elected for 6 years. Well, if you had a 12-year limit, you could only be elected twice as a senator. That's two 6-year terms. That's a long time. If you did it as a congressman, it's every 2 years. Okay, I had 6 elections. Cool, great, whatever. But it's like there's
Noticed your mic is upside down.
there's time for there's time for um, I think a lot of arguments people against term limits will be like, sometimes it takes time to get the work done. And it's like, okay, you've been elected into Congress 6, 8 years continuously, consecutively. That's a long time to have not got and put any kind of work that's making an impact on people.
Especially if they keep getting elected unopposed with
Yeah,
no debates.
and so I think people should always have the challenge of knowing that you're not safe. You don't have you know, once you're in, you're in. You know what I mean? It's not like one of those things. I think that's where when you do see what people are most remembered for in political terms, it's never usually, it's the presidents and the mayors that are always the ones that are the people we always look back on as our leaders. You know, we're not looking, we're not doing big old statues of Senate leaders. We're not doing big old statues of the Speaker of the House. You know what I mean? Like they'll be remembered in their own term, but it's those leaders who only had 4 or 8 years of time in office that if they made an impact, they made an impact, and it showed for generations. You know, I think I think you know I've almost even thought of doing kind of like a judicial way of voting. It's like you have to get enough things of, do you want to, how does it work for judges? It's something like, do you want to keep this judge? Should judge blah 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 be retained or whatever? Yes, no. Okay, if there's enough no's, then maybe that's how it kind of determines if,
Like proportional up to a certain threshold of no's.
yeah, it's not even like, okay, you need to get certain percent of the vote of this. It's just like yes, no. And it's like if you're getting that much no's, then then it's like, okay, then you can, maybe that's another way to kind of determine, you're not going to be thinking about the term, you're going to be thinking about, um am I going to get enough people who want who think I need to continue being in the thing? And if you're getting those no's votes, then it's an automatic, okay, you got to go, like you got to be put on the ballot for election. you know
Now, the case against judges on term limits, and this is why the Supreme Court is not on term limits. The intention was to insulate them from the pressures of an election,
Well,
so they can just try and look at things objectively. But the argument against that mentality is that
it's always going to
it
be,
just ties
it's always
it
their
just
objective.
it just ties that they're still political. It just ties that to the
Party that's
to the
fucking them.
presidency.
I don't know. I just I go back and I just say that's one way I looked at it, but yeah, to me, I think a 12-year term limit. You know, um, presidents. I think a president should have up to 10. I think a mayor should have up to 10. I've thought this is my
10
thing.
years.
A mayor, because that's how the structure works, right? A mayor, governor, and most mayors, governor, and most governors, and then the presidents can only serve up to 8 years, right?
Right.
In most cases, I know some states like in Texas, you can have.
Is it, you think 8 years is long enough for president, or do you want to shorten it, lengthen it?
I think I think 10 years is good, and here's
For a
my
president?
thing. Yes, for a president, I think that if a president gets elected to a second term, right? I think at that point, they become what is it called, a lame duck president. I think that a president should at least have one more chance, to get a 2-year term. You do get what I'm saying by that? Like,
Oh, if they're not elected, if they're not reelected the second time, they should have another chance to.
mhm.
Well, that's what Donald Trump
No,
did.
no, 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 no. But I think I think even a president should have a somewhat of an extension, of being elected into office is what
What do you
I'm
mean?
instead of not 8 years, I think a president should have up to 10 years worth of being. We're talking about limits for elected officials. And you're saying is 6 years or 8 years too much for being a president? I said, no, I think a president should have can have up to 10 years of being worth in office. That's what that's what,
Perhaps a term of 5 years instead of 4 years.
yeah, you know. Um, you think about the current system now, like 4 years, you get elected, right? Your first year, okay, you're it's a whole total switch. If you're switching from one party to another, it's a whole total switch of mentalities, mindsets coming in, switching, and then you have your first in current practice, you have that first year of whole transition. And then the second year, it's like, okay, we need to get stuff done because midterms is happening, and we don't want our party to lose, and we need to make a strong effort to look like we're doing good, so our parties can stay in power, or we can have our parties get into power. So you work hard, 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 and then you either win or you lose. So if you win, you have only about good 2 years, I think, of hard legislation or hard work as being a leader, and then you have your other last year having to worry about running for election again. Or if you're not running for election, you're just kind of like in that back burner seat. So I think a 5 year thing for a mayor, governor, president term, 10 years most, and then 12 years most for any other elected official would there's time between within those years to get work done and meaningful work. Because I think that's the biggest thing is like people need to have the ability to have meaningful time to put in the work. And and how do you maximize your time? So like I said, 20 years in office and you haven't done nothing, yeah, okay, like I said, if you're 10 years, 15 years and you haven't done really nothing, then you've wasted your time.
That seems like it would be an argument against term limits
Of
to
what?
take of giving them enough time to learn the process. Like that's because that's how that seems to be how things are now. Your first term, you get in to learn, and then you run for your re-election. Then your second term is when you actually do shit.
Yeah, but it should also be a practice of time management. You know what I mean? Like of people maximize. Like that's
Oh, so
where,
if you need another term to start doing stuff, you have managed your time well.
yeah, like that's where you get. Um, and granted, we're talking right now in the assumption that all elected officials serve 12 years. Serve past.
Hypothetically,
Yeah,
right?
somebody does a bad job 4 years being elected, you know what I mean? And they're like, they don't get elected for a second term or something. But we're just saying in those cases where like you have like in red states in Texas in the most red county, you're gonna have a Republican person. If you're a Republican and if you're likable enough, in a red majority district, you're gonna always have to not worry about ever being out, being you're never gonna have to worry about a Democrat taking over. Same thing if you go to California. You go to some counties in California, the most blue county in California, that elected official is never gonna worry about um, losing their seat to a Republican. So
That
they
that has well that more has to do with different media outlets being aligned with different political parties and using media as basically propaganda outlets for their own ideologies.
well, no, what I'm saying here is that I think term limits in this case, I think the reason why term limits come up is because of places where there's not a pretty equal balance of thinking. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like it's the people, it's the Democrats living in in Arkansas that can't get their voices heard because it's just always going to vote Republican. It's the Republicans living in Oregon, Portland, in that area that, they're, I think those are always the people that are always going to be in favor of term limits because there there's always going to be that for them there's always the same thing. There's never a check for these people because they can stay there as long as they want. You know, I think it's in the districts of middle, independent, more what are they called, purple counties or purple states. It's like one year they voted this way, one year they voted that. Those are the ones, even in federal elections, that the media and everyone pays the most attention to because whoever can capture the pulse of that state is kind of capturing the pulse of the whole country. And those people are always you don't see elected officials in purple states being there 15 plus years, 20 years. They're usually more moderate. You got to be moderate to be somebody that's going to be elected for a while in those types of states. That's kind of where I wish the minds that's kind of the thinking I wish more people had and more politicians had is towards that moderation, being in a moderate kind of point of view.
Yeah, but instead, people rather than people just running to the respective sides
And
recruiting their
that's
own voters.
why, and because we live in this world now where that's the way we go. That's why a term limit now for me makes sense. I never
I'd say
used.
that's a problem with parties in general, not just term limits.
Yeah, true. But a term limit is a way to put the parties into check. Would you say?
Yeah.
It's a way to kind of get them to be like, you're not here for even the party elected officials. It's like, I don't know what if the Republican National Party, convention, or the what is it called, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the national parties. I don't know if they have anything in their bylaws that say even their elected leaders can, do they have term limits? Does the president?
I don't think they have term
Well,
limits built in their own conventions.
yeah, they can stay there as long as you want. So if by not having a limit creates an avenue for dark money to come in, bad money to come in, corruption to come in, and I think that's the only way be, to get people to put their full honesty into perspective because they know no matter what, I have only this amount of time to get this done, and if I don't, I'm done. My legacy is going to be the one that's hurt, not that. And I think at the end of the day, people care more about their legacy. How do I want to be remembered? And don't you think that'd be more fun putting officials on that?
Well, my hope is that it would force newer people to jump into the fray, jump into the
Enforce
limelight.
honesty? Like, don't you think like it's just the there's
Personally, I want to force more younger people to jump in.
yeah, but I think younger people are just learning. We need to create better ways for younger people to understand the process too, because it is so divided.
And that's the issue with schools.
Yeah, and it is so divided, and it is so oh, it is I like people my age and younger only think of politics necessarily of really. I mean, it's politics has never been this nice, cool, where the people are very nice to each other. It's always been pretty brutal. But like people now only think most young people now think it's you versus me, Democrat versus Republican, liberal versus conservative, right, left, progressive, whatever. Um, and it is just looked at like as you're the enemy now. Um, and so there's no room for the people don't leave room for any kind of engagement, and so there's no again if there's no engagement, there's no cooperation. You're on now 8 years again of rallying against, I'm never going to vote for this thing because the opposing party, or I don't like this political thought, or I don't like this, and so, but I know I'm always gonna get elected. So it's like, no, no, you're not. Quit, pounding your fist and saying, look, everybody, look at me. I'm against this. I'm gonna fight, fight, fight. Go to the table. You have 2 more years because that's it. You're out. You are out. You have 2 more years. You need to do something. If not, we'll just vote you out before that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's how I want people to start feeling. In I think that would be the most ideal way for politicians to be, because it's like I need to get work done because there's no other option. It's either I produce or I make the effort to produce and my
Voters need to
voters see
step
it.
up and actually exercise their leverage as voters.
Hmm. Like, what if recalls were more of a thing? What if we had the opportunity to do what Matt Gaetz did, basically, to Kevin McCarthy? you know, he basically said, you know what? I want to make a motion to get rid of the speaker. You know what I mean? Why can't
California loves recalls.
exactly look at Mr. Newsom? Yeah. Um, but it's just so easy for them to get a there's no checks for them, basically. Yeah. You have a
What about next question? Are professional legislators inherently elitist? Professional legislatures meaning legislators that have set salaries.
well, yeah, you're talking about like established profession. You're talking about people who've been in the system for a while, right?
No, just paid legislators who often get in for who often stay in there for a while because they
Yeah.
have more resources.
Are they elitist because they are getting paid? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe.
Uh, no, well, repeat your question again.
Are professional legislatures inherently elitist? And more specifically, is New Mexico better off with an unprofessional legislature?
Well, I think politics is a game, right? You know what I mean? And it is there's a way to do there's a way of doing politics. There's a way of legislating. So I think you do have to kind of have the knack for it. I personally I think it just you need to have the people that know the game, and it needs to be a good balance of know the game and then outside. That's my opinion. Like, it's like I think we maybe we should elect people who are like, it should be okay. You either okay, our two senators, one's a professional legislator, the other one's a farmer from you know what I mean? I don't know, like more everyday people. It's like, but I uh I think you do have to know how what you're doing when you're trying to legislate. You know what I mean? You do have to have that understanding.
And the salary would help them with it.
Well, my thing would be like, what would be, how would they make money then? You know what I mean? Like, how would they get an income? Because right now we already say, well, they already accept corporate. We're trying to get rid of the whole taking bribes and
It would
donations from.
probably be set into the state budget by the legislature or a citizens commission.
Yeah, but I think they would. I think a salary for them would only make sense. That, and to me, makes sense. Like, you need to be paid at a certain wage or whatever. But when you think about it too, these politicians who, they get paid hundred some thousand a year. Um, for most Americans, that's a lot of money. 200 some thousand, whatever, depending what level of government you're in. The question you always have is, you know, how are they making extra money to afford all these other things? That's where, that you got to find out.
Fundraising,
Yeah,
donations
yeah,
from
yeah,
voters,
exactly. So it's
lobbyists.
like, at some point, maybe you got to cap. If a politician is getting income from some other source, then they need to be maybe heavily taxed on their federal, on their salary, from the government. Because if you're getting from here, then you need to be getting less from the government salary. It's almost like you know.
There's been an effort to pass local statewide legislation in every state to call for a constitutional convention. This is an effort that's I think the past decade, and the purpose of that constitutional convention would be to ban private donations
To a
to political campaigns,
yeah,
which would really curb the lobbying industry. Do you
yeah.
think you'd be in favor of something like that?
Oh, of course. I mean,
Just banning all private donations to campaigns?
yeah. I mean, what of course of course somebody running a campaign needs some type of income to make the rounds, to do what they need to do. But that person shouldn't, a single of that should not go to that individual at all, you know. Put it towards your charity. Put it towards your, why can't politicians running for political office do what um what the celebrities do when they, like, you'll do like, hey, the great celebrity cook off, and then they'll win the competition and $100,000 is going towards my foundation of blah, 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 blah. Why can't
I just imagined the Great British Baking Show, but with politicians.
yeah, imagine something like that. That'd be cool. But then the argument would be like, well, we got to pay our staff, they would. That's always the thing. There's always like, yeah, but it's like, okay, we don't care if that money is going towards your staff campaign, nothing like that. Not one single bit of money should be made towards you, the person. If somebody wants to donate something for your campaign, whatever, that it needs to go into some kind of fund that can't just be easily accessed, and maybe, and it has to be audited in a way. You know what I mean? Because if it is going to be going towards staff, then it should be audited to make sure that it is going towards what its true intent is for.
We have one comment from my buddy Trenton. What Trump did a bunch of horrible policies for his 4 years.
What was the comment?
He's saying what Trump did a bunch of horrible policies for his 4 years. I guess implying no. He's definitely in favor of term limits.
Yeah.
Want to elaborate on that, Trent?
I there's always, the only countries that don't have term limits are monarchies or dictatorships. So, and so it just, don't you think that if we're going to make our president have term limits, every other aspect of government, your Senate leader, House leader, should have term limits too? Because why not? Like, I mean, it just would make sense. It just would make sense. People would be okay with it. Would you see any person, can you picture any average human citizen being like, I kind of don't agree with, did you hear that Congress was trying to pass a law saying that the U.S. House Representatives, they can only be in Congress for X amount of years? Like, I don't know if I'm in favor of that. You know what I mean?
Who was saying that?
No, I'm saying, could you imagine a U.S. citizen being against?
Oh,
can you imagine U.S. citizens having that conversation?
Yeah, that should be like, yeah. I don't think we shouldn't have elected officials in the Congress, the Senate, retiring out of that office.
Yeah. So if it's something where, even deep down, you don't even have to do a poll. You know what I mean? Like, if it's something that people,
we shouldn't have elected officials who die in the office.
Yeah,
definitely.
Somebody asked me this the other day too. If we have age limits for people entering into Congress, that they have to be like 25 or something, should we have a cap on age, like older age, if they're
age limits?
Yeah. What's your opinion on that?
I would love age limits.
On what age?
Perhaps maybe I'm not sure. Perhaps maybe a cognitive test too.
Yeah, but now you're an ageist. No.
I guess so.
It's such a fine line. That's what I'm saying. Like, how do you determine that line of not crossing, because it's just funny how you think it's, wisdom was always going to be overtake, I think, in a lot of sense.
By the way, since we have two viewers, let us know how the audio is. If you can hear us all right.
If you can, I forgot what I was just saying. We were talking about, oh, don't you think it's kind of funny how people seem to, like wisdom seems to overtake youth, in the sense of like people feel more comfortable being led by somebody in their 70s because they have wisdom, right? Rather than somebody in their, I don't know, maybe a 27-year-old trying to run for something, because it's like, yeah, but he's still too young, you know what I mean? And I don't know if I feel comfortable
I'd say
somebody.
the age limit on the younger end should be adulthood, 18.
Yeah, and then you do see a lot of 18-year-olds and today, and you're just kind of like, I don't know.
Like if you're legally an adult, you should do whatever adults should
Yeah,
be doing.
yeah, yeah. Why?
And I think everything like the drinking age should be 18. I think
Yeah.
if you can, here's a good way to look at it. If you can join the military, you should be able to run for office.
Ah, yeah, yeah. And like makes you go back. I don't know the full history, but why? What was the reasoning behind having to be 25 or whatever it is to enter into politics? You know what I mean? Like, why was that the age that was picked? Like, do you have any idea?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, like who defined that? Who made that rule? That's what I want to know.
I
you
think that
know,
was drafted when the Constitution was drafted.
was it really? Yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't even know the full history
That's
of.
good. That'd be good, something to look into.
Yeah. What other questions?
But back to the question of professional legislatures. How with professional legislators that are paid, how would you prevent them from becoming elitist? Like, how could you?
I think elitism is in people. For some people, they're just already in
So
it. I
that goes
mean,
back to term limits. Just limit their time in there.
yeah, because like you're trying to control someone's behavior, and it's like, I there's just going to be douchebags no matter what. To me, like an elitist person is kind of, I associate with a douchebag. So, and to me, no matter.
Technical term.
Yeah. So in my opinion, they're going to, you can't get that out of them. And once you give them that power, it's gonna just create this opening for them even more. So yeah, it goes back to,
So I'd say that's a more pragmatic view of it. You're going to have bad
you need
people seeking power. So just term limits, put the limit
term
on
limits
everyone.
helps term limits help um eliminate it. And not eliminate it, because you're always, like you said, they're always going to have it, but it helps decrease, I feel it helps decrease the chances of creating that mindset. Because like, again, too, there are some really, there's some good-hearted politicians, I feel they're good people, but who didn't start off as, one would say, elite. They're not elitists, but now, even if they're not that way, they kind of give the impression of being elitist because they've been there so long. Like, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not going to name any politicians right now, but it's just, I know I've met some, I see some, you see them on the national news, you see them in local politics, and it's like, you've been in there for a while, and I feel like I feel like you don't know how to relate. Anyway, you're a good person. You're very nice. I really like your ideas, whatever. But I don't know how to relate to you, or you seem like you're a hard person to relate to, because you've just been in the system so long, and it just feels like you don't understand what I'm trying to tell you. So I think even good-hearted people who have
Do you feel like you relate to Alexandria Cortez?
no, I don't. Well, I think because maybe there's a correlation in some opposite parallel. In that I think I think our approaches to it are vastly different. But I think at the center, it's kind of we both have the big disagreement of the established politician. But one could now say, one could, whether you like Alexandria Cortez or not, one could now say she is becoming an elitist because she has now been in it for a while. She's somebody who continues to always, she's very loud, you know, she's she gets she's able to portray her opinion very well. But it's always a an opinion that only is within her circle, her bubble, you know, that circle of progressivism. So, you know, is her thing good for her district? I don't know. I don't live there. But I can say I have heard more. You've seen more town halls of Alexandria Ocasio Cortez going where she's having to speak over people of protesters now. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that now all of a sudden she's a elitist person, but I think her spark has now also definitely it's a different spark that she's had to when she first was elected, because when she was first elected she was fresh, she was, you know, she was fresh perspective, she was new ideas, she was new way of thinking, whatever. And then she kind of got sucked into like established the whole established group think is what I think, rather than what she was giving based off her perspective of where she lived. She kind of took the perspective of the whole general group. And so now I think in a sense she's kind of, one could say she now maybe becoming elitist because now she only represents those mainstream thoughts, you know, rather than to what she was initially elected for. For the Joe Schmoes of wherever she lives in Brooklyn or, you know, where she, I'm not sure where
I'm not
she,
sure where I think it's part of New
it's
York
one of the
City.
boroughs. I know that, but that's where I say it's like, and she may be very well loved in her district or very well liked, but you know, what is what's going to be her, what is she added to her name of legislative history that she can attach herself to and be like, this was something substantial I helped pass that made a big impact for my district and for the country, and it's something that opened up avenues for the country, you know. I don't know.
I can think of one.
You know, and I'm saying that I think that's why I go back to even the most good-hearted people, good-natured people, eventually will get sucked into something that they lost their focus of what the work that needs to be done is, you know, needs to be you know, done. And so it only makes sense that a term limit would help keep that focus and that fire and that spark and that drive. Because sometimes there's eras where it's like, this is the main thing we need to focus on. You know, there's just something where you need somebody to get, you know, they need to get the job done on this. We need to fix our economy. Okay, maybe this person does something that gets it done. Okay, cool. They did their time, you know, whatever. Now we need somebody to, you know, for this. We need somebody to move our country of unifying our relationships with ourselves again as a country. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I think I think it's the people who make something their main focus and that lead to a can lead to a greater impact later on, you know, because they're focused. They had one mission to get something done. And that's where I sometimes you think you see the greater results is those people who always repeat their goals and are always pushing to get that one thing they want done, completed, rather than just saying, I want to do this because I'm the best person to do this. Because, yeah, you're the best person to do everything. But I don't hear you talking about something that you feel,
Term
you know.
limits can help focus someone's
Yeah,
job in office.
yeah.
For the last question, for the last 15 minutes, about how much democracy is too much democracy? Because you and I were familiar with history. The founding fathers of the United States were not big fans of democracy. They wanted to limit it. So what's the line between giving people the power to choose their leaders, and creating strong offices for action? What's the line there? What's the balance?
What a question. What's the balance? Well, in regards to what though? Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? What's too much democracy? Like,
Well, as we could use the electoral college as an example, how the presidency is determined. Do you think the U.S. president should be decided by popular vote?
ah, no, I don't. I, I,
Why?
I think that was probably one thing the founding fathers very smart on, because um the electoral college is the way to have a minority's input the most. It's the only way that a minority could have the most I don't want to say input, but the most what's the word I'm looking for?
So you want to avoid the tyranny of the majority. You don't want to avoid the most populous parts of the country having the most power over the vote.
Well, because if we were a country, say the size of, say we were the country the size of Belgium, like that landmass.
Say we were much smaller.
Yeah, popular vote makes sense, but we are such a melting pot of cultures, of demographic, of everything. We're so vast. Like, I mean, if somebody coming to the United States and going to 7 states, would think that they're was going to they're like almost like countries. Our states are like
So you're
countries.
saying because the United States is so big and so diverse, that creates more necessity to protect against the tyranny of the majority.
Yeah,
If it
because
was smaller, with a more homogeneous population, like over in Europe, we could afford to have more democracy.
yes, yes, that's just what I agree, because I feel if you go to somebody living in Iowa and ask somebody their perspective on something, and then you go all the way to Boston, you will find that these two people are Americans, American citizens living here, but there's probably a good chance that if you've talked to 10 people from each of those places and asked them the same question on something, and political question, whatever, you will see that those responses will probably be very vastly different. If you probably showed a video of these of what do you think of this? Do you agree with this or do you agree with that? People from each of those areas will probably be like, "Oh my gosh, like is that really how people live out there? Like, people like that's how you're okay, there would be a criticism or there would be a necessity to explain the differences of of how they are, of the cultural, of the geographical differences of the parts of the country. And I think because you can clearly find that.
But that was the intention. The founders wanted each state to be somewhat uh, autonomous,
Mhm.
to craft policy around their
And that's
respective
why the
populations.
electoral college was created. But that's why it's like, okay, you will always have, you know, the states, people complain about the popular, not having a popular vote or whatever, but it's like, okay, your state determines your population determines your electoral college vote, right? So if you're with somebody of conservative values and you live in Idaho, you're probably, your vote, your voice, and your reflection of your thing, your is going to go towards that in your vote, and your state probably will vote for whatever country president is going to, win. If you go to California, same thing. Your vote is safe going to a Democrat, and they have, but look at the disparity in in how much.
Do you think the recent calls for more democracy at the federal level might be due to the fact that local and regional politics is kind of ignored now? There's so much focus on national politics,
Yeah.
so
Um,
that could be that could be a cultural issue. We should be paying more attention to local politics.
well, I think the local politics kind of do, they create the pulse of the nation, right? If you're the type of local leaders getting elected will create the type of energy coming out of
Well, it depends on the area.
yeah, the area. But yeah, no, I think I do think that there's too much of a national perspective into the local politics. You know what I mean? Like,
Like there's too much of a top-down philosophy.
yeah, it's
We
too
should be looking at
much.
it
It's
bottom
too
up.
much of like, if I have an opinion on something in a local, I'm a local politician, right? I have an opinion on something towards the roads. I want to get this certain thing passed because of XYZ. And there's too much of like, if I do an approach this way, somebody can even be like, oh, that's like a Biden way, you know what I mean? Or if I do it this way, it's like, oh, that's too much. Like, you're like Trump. That's a Trump approach or something like that. It's too, people associate any kind of political move or political kind of working as
You're
that's
saying that partisanship is more prevalent at the national level.
yeah, and it still does carry out into local politicians. Like, we saw this in the local elections here during the COVID time when Biden and Trump were first running, and there were like local elections here are not really, there's not, it's non-affiliated. It's not like, you're running for mayor here, you're not running as a Democrat. You're running as you're running for mayor here, you're not running as a Republican. You're just running as the mayor. And it's like, but it's like certain issues that are somewhat prevalent in a local community but also have some kind of prevalence in a larger landscape. People will people will look at that local mayor and they'll give their perspective on what they feel is needed for the area, right? Just the area, not on what they think of a general thing, but what's needed for the area. Too many people, I still think, dissect it as what kind of what kind of, I don't want to say, political stance are you leaning on when you're like, how are you thinking when you're doing that? Is that a liberal perspective? Is that a conservative perspective? People are too worried about what kind of side you're thinking, and rather than just like, no, I wasn't even thinking that way because I'm a Republican. I was thinking that way because I think this needs to be get fixed because this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. Or no, I'm not thinking we don't need to fix this because I'm only saying this because I'm a Democrat. I'm saying this because XYZ. It's too much
Is
of,
that partisan tribalism a reason to limit democracy? You think?
but limit democracy in what sense? Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Is that a part of the reason to limit it? Because,
Like when we're talking about the electoral college,
oh,
is that tribalism a reason why we should keep in the electoral college and not put the power, not put the decision for the presidency strictly in the voters' hands?
well, I think it's the two-party system that makes it, that ruins that, and I think that would be another great topic for another podcast because I think that is different there. It's not the democracy itself; it's the two-party system. I think that makes it very tribalistic, um, because I mean, there's democracy not just in politics. It's we do it um, when we voting for our favorite person to get off elected, off a TV show or something like that. I mean, there's not just we're just so used to thinking of democracy in the sense of the political way. It's just that it's becoming so tainted because of our two-party system that's why I think we're even having the question: is there too much democracy? And I think there, in a sense, you can't have too much of everything, which is why I'm a big proponent of we need more moderate candidates running for political office.
Another example would be the fact that the Democratic Party is not holding a primary this year.
Yeah.
Do you think, and so it's basically a shoo-in for their nominee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
And
think a sitting president should always have some kind of challenger within their own party?
yes, because
Is that could be a question? That's a question in and of itself. Is should parties be in charge of running their own candidates for nominees?
well, it all goes back to, it's like there needs to be some structure somewhere, but so there needs to be a structured system to hold these candidates, going, because it's like, well, I'm running as the cool kids of America party. I mean, if you had no structure, people could just run how whatever. So I think there still needs
Well,
to
we
be,
do need more parties available.
yes, but I also
The problem
think,
is that the two biggest parties now control the process.
yeah, they're monopolies. Yeah, I mean, they're basically,
Duopoly.
yeah, they're duopolies. And so yeah, there needs to be a, what is it called, a breaking apart of that, of those parties. Kind of, I don't know about, some have said, should the United States go towards more of a European kind of parliament style, like where it's like there's the Labor Party, there's this party, there's this party, and then just how many seats you get determines who's running the,
Proportional representation.
yeah. I don't know if that would work, but I think sometimes you look at it now, you kind of look at those ways, and you're just kind of like, maybe that would be something.
Well, arguably, the parties have even more power in that kind of system.
Yeah, that's true too. So
Because people over there, they just vote for their party, and whatever percentage of the vote they get, that's how many seats they get.
I think that's what you're saying here is a perfect thing to tie back to the beginning question: do we need term limits? This is why, again, I think we do need term limits, because then now you go back to trying to define. Well, we
You
need
think
more
that's the first
parties.
step,
We need.
putting
We
in
need.
term limits?
Yeah, really. Think about it now. Like now, just you saying that there just made me go back to being like, well, honestly, the really only way to hold these parties in check is to limit them. You know, I really think about it. Like how else could you have a total restructuring of the political system? We say the two-party system is failing. We say the electoral college is failing. We say all these things are failing, but yet they were in place when this country was started, and they kind of got the country. The country's the United States is like, you know, one of the greatest world powers in history. And so it's like, okay, so what was the good of why they originally had these intentions, and how? I think we need to pause and always look, and we should look back and be like, what did we do as stupid humans to screw up the original intent of this? So we've kind of messed up. We've kind of fuzzied the waters a little with the intent of a lot of these things. That's why now people are questioning term limits. That's not why now we're getting all these things. Why we're getting these things of the two-party system failing. It's not necessarily that the two-party system is failing, is that we have put the wrong people in place to let them make it fail. And the only way to get it back into balance, in my opinion, is to term them out and tell them, people have to know, like, we're tired of living in a society of no substantial change happening, you know, and you people are getting comfy, and you get in your position and you just get comfy, and then you kind of forget, and it's just a whole cycle and over again of I'm gonna fight for you, and then yeah, he's my fighter, and then you win, and then it's like, oh, I don't like you, and then the election again, yeah, he's my fighter, I'm voting for him. Oh, it's like in a roller coaster, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and so it's like I think people are just exhausted of going through that. Here we go again, another person saying they're gonna. Here we go again. Here he comes every 4 years when it's election time. That's when you see him working hard, and he's gonna win because it's a Democrat majority state or it's a Republican majority county. Limit them, get rid of them. I mean, make them earn it, and then I think we can start seeing a country that's going to be more productive and more willing to work with each other. And we're not going to look at each other as you versus me. It's going to be like, hey, we now, like how are we going to get this done?
I think that's a good way to end it.
Yeah.
Streaming for about an hour, 60 minutes. Now, pass the question back to you, viewers. What do you think about term limits? What should they be? Should they be required for every elected official? What do you think about parties? Should we have more parties? How do we force more parties into the fray? Do all that. Like, comment, all that jazz. And then stop.